All right, so recording some more post-read thoughts for Goodreads today on the second book in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. This one's called The Drawing of the Three. So read this one right after rereading The Gunslinger. And The Gunslinger, again, is like, it's a good prologue to the series. It has a lot of good character moments, and it's a good introduction. And there are some sequences that I really do enjoy, but by and large, I'm really just not a huge fan of like where the book goes, and was kind of largely uninterested in a lot of like big sections of it. It felt very slow and kind of I don't want to say boring, but kind of getting to that point for me. Thankfully, The Drawing of the Three is like within the first chapter, I knew like this book is going to be so much better than the other one, and thankfully, I love this book. I thought it was super fun. Yeah, so I mean, I'm probably gonna spoil the book, just so if somebody's watching and hasn't read it and you don't want it spoiled, probably don't watch this. But just for myself, as like if I look back on this later and want to remember certain details, first off, I really like that this picked up immediately after the events of The Gunslinger. Just because with his confrontation with the Gunslinger's confrontation with the Man in Black, and how the Man in Black is kind of drawing the tarot cards and is reading about things that are going to happen, seeing that immediately come to fruition in this book was really cool, and I like the continuity between the two. I also love King's use of, the book is called The Drawing of the Three, obviously, but there's all these allusions to playing cards throughout the book, and if you kind of pay attention to that, I think it is like really interesting. There's the three main chapters, one for each of the three people that are being drawn, and then there's like little interlude chapters called shuffles. So again, I like all the kind of symbolism there with a deck of playing cards. Of the new characters that we meet in Roland's quartet, I really like Eddie Dean a lot, and I thought that his intro chapter, the sequence of, when Roland first discovers the kind of connection through a door, and then he sees Eddie, and Eddie's in an airplane. The whole sequence of trying to get past or get through the customs line with the drugs that Eddie has is like so suspenseful. I love that entire sequence from start to finish, and I really was like, in some of these cases, like I did not know how or if they were going to get out of it. And so I think King did a really good job of towing that line with building that tension, and how it ended as well. And like, it's kind of like a very, a big, loud kind of action set piece that ends at this, this kind of mob boss's, place in New York. Just so different from starting the book like this and it going back to, our Earth, as opposed to everything that we saw before in The Gunslinger. I think was very refreshing, and I think it was very smart. I also love King's approach to when, Roland obviously is not from this world, so he's kind of like a fish out of water and trying to like learn phrases or items or how things work when it's all different, and kind of seeing him kind of like try to figure that stuff out as it goes and kind of stumbling along the way is really fun, and I think pretty funny in a lot of moments. And I think King does a really good job of continually doing that throughout the entire story. I really like Eddie Dean. I think that the character growth that he shows is really strong from, his addiction that he has, and then Roland basically saves Eddie's life by helping him get through, this drug situation. But then at the same token, Eddie basically saves Roland's life by when Roland is, severely injured and severely sick. Eddie basically, is taking care of him the whole time and has, helped him get medicine that he needed to help him stay alive. So that duo of the two of them, I think, was my favorite. And after they do get out of New York back to Midworld, the interactions that they have and the conversations when Eddie's telling Roland a lot about like, his story with his brother, and like, how going off to war, I think it was Vietnam specifically, was really difficult on him, which is what led to his, abuse of drugs. And then that's how Eddie kind of got exposed to that world through his brother. All of those sections I thought were like absolutely excellent and really, really good character development. So was really a fan of that. When we shifted from there to the second chapter on the chapter's called The Lady of Shadows, and it's the split personality between Odetta and Detta Walker. I ended up liking this chapter as well. Again, not as much as I did for Eddie's, but something about the way that the Eddie Dean chapter felt like a slow burn, where Roland kind of makes contact with Eddie. They're kind of vibing each other out, and obviously this is a very like otherworldly experience for Eddie to kind of go through. But gradually, like as it goes, they kind of have to trust each other more and help each other more because the situation gets more dire. With the second chapter, we're kind of just thrown into it. Like, I like how you learn more about Eddie slowly as the story goes and as Roland has more time with him. This one, it's like you just immediately, you're kind of seeing the split personality between Odetta and Detta. And I didn't love, I think that was the one part of the book where I was not super pleased with it, how we just kind of jump into that. The momentum of everything that Eddie and Roland had going, it kind of stalled at that point. I really wasn't a fan of that, but then once they pull Odetta into Midworld, I'm back in and absolutely loved it. The split personality thing I thought was genius, and I really liked the very like human moments between Eddie and Odetta, and how like, these are two people that have basically been pulled out of their world into some other place that they're not familiar with. It's a totally different reality, and yet like they're able to find a human connection between the two of them, which I think is really cool. And I think there's a deeper meaning or a deeper message of like love and emotion and connection can kind of transcend time. It can transcend differences, whether it's culturally or whatever it is. So I really did like that. But then when Odetta would switch personalities to Detta was literally terrifying. There were some really, really good sections where genuinely it was scary, and it was like, I don't exactly know how these guys are going to get out of it if she is this maniacal and it's just out to get them in every single possible way. So really good deep character from King, which is what he does best. But I thought that whole section was excellent, and it leads to the rising action of the book, where Eddie, even though Roland said not to, Eddie ends up leaving Odetta with a gun to defend herself when Eddie has to go back with a wheelchair to get Roland. And then of course Odetta switches to her, the other personality of Detta, and leaves. So now it's like you've got this maniacal person who is hell-bent on murdering you with a weapon. And so this kind of push and pull of like, how are they going to do this? How are they going to whatever? And that's when they discover the third door. I'm trying to see what the name of that chapter is. Oh, it's The Pusher. I like this one. This is probably maybe my least favorite of the three. But it's just different. So The Pusher ends up being basically a psychotic serial killer in the same time as Odetta, and is actually the person that is responsible for injuring her both when she was a kid, which led to the split personality, and then pushed her in front of a train, which is the reason why she was permanently handicapped and lost her legs. So, and it also, this is the person that actually ended up killing Jake and the gunslinger, the person that pushed him in front of a car. So I think this sets up an interesting kind of, what's going to happen, because Roland actually saves Jake in this book by intervening when he does. So I think that'll probably set up some future stuff. But a lot of really interesting plot points set up here. I like the sequence where Detta gets the best of Eddie back in Midworld, basically has him tied up and is going to feed him to the lobstrosities coming from the ocean at sunset. So we have kind of like a ticking clock of how much time is left. Roland is still like desperately needs more bullets for his weapons, and he needs medicine, otherwise he's not going to make it. And so he's trying to while he's in somebody else's body, this serial killer basically, he's trying to figure all this stuff out. the interactions that he has, going to like, I think it was a gun store to try to get the bullets, and then going to a drugstore for the antibiotics that he needs. Like, just amazing scenes. Again, the fish out of water thing is so good. And then it ultimately leads to kind of like this final short section where they have the actual drawing of the three. So, you know, Roland kind of sees something in each one of them, and he views them specifically like as, you know, all as gunslingers now. And it ultimately leads to Roland is able to like kind of heal Odetta from her split personality, and it leads to this new personality of hers called Susanna. So I think this book is like significantly better than The Gunslinger. It's one of those that if you kind of were like on The Gunslinger and then not sure about the rest of the series because of it, I would recommend just read this immediately, and then you'll know, you know, because if you like this, you're going to want to keep reading it. And I very much, when you get to the end of this book, it's like, ooh, I do want to keep reading. So I'm very excited for the next one in the series, which is called The Wasteland. So I'll probably read that one before too long. But yeah, I think I don't know exactly where I want to place it on my King list. I think it's going to hover somewhere around the top 10. It might be just outside of it. I do think, again, this does kind of some classic King stuff of having extremely deep characters that you do care about and putting them in just like sometimes extremely dire and difficult situations and kind of just seeing what happens. So I really like that. I like that Roland is very vulnerable in this book, and he relies on Eddie constantly. But at the same time, Eddie in turn also needs Roland, you know, because Eddie's vulnerability in Midworld can easily get the better of him. So I really like that. I like, again, kind of like the, you know, what's going to happen thing now that Jake was, at least in this version of the reality, when Roland went back, actually saved his life. So how that's going to play out, I think, will be interesting. So I look forward to kind of keep reading and seeing what happens there. But love this book. Really good characters. There's some really suspenseful stuff, really good tension. I think it's interesting that actually not a lot happened in Midworld. They were just basically like they progressed along the terrain, but really as far as they got is all that happened in Midworld. Everything else was back on Earth, which again I think was a very like refreshing thing after, you know, kind of The Gunslinger to me being kind of mid to begin with, no pun intended. But really enjoyed this book. Look forward to keep reading them. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but regardless, yeah, that's kind of my main takeaways is like really, really strong characters, which presumably are going to be around to stay in the story. I think really good depth with Roland as a character. I think even like better depth than we saw in the first one, because in the Gunslinger, you rely basically solely on flashbacks. It's the only way you kind of get any depth. This I thought was different. You know, Roland was vulnerable. But yet he needed to draw these three to be able to continue on his quest, but he also needed them, you know, for support and basically to be able to survive along the way. So really good setup and conceit by King, and I think he executed it beautifully. I give this book, I think, at 4 stars. I was between 4 and 4.5, but I think 4 is fair. And again, it's gonna kind of hover around my top 10, but I'm gonna think about that a little bit more. But definitely it's significantly better than The Gunslinger. So I highly recommend this. So if you're iffy on the series or whatever, I think this book is worth it. And it's not super long. My copy was like a little shy of 500 pages. So it's very readable and it flows very quickly. So that's it for now. I'll be back with The Wastelands at some point before long. But yeah, I would say 4 stars.